Recording. All right, perfect.
Got
You can hear me, correct?
Hear you.
All right, perfect. All right, let's do this while we have each other. Thank you so much for your time. I'll do a 3, 2, 1 countdown, and want you to know that this will air in 3 different versions: the full video, the shortened video of like 5 minutes for Facebook, and then audio only on the radio. So 3 different links, 3 different places. Okay. All right. Here we go in 3, 2, 1. It has been such a joy this month getting to know all of my guests. I'm Carol Daniel from KMOX Radio, news anchor and talk show host here with Odyssey, St. Louis. We have 6 radio stations in St. Louis, Missouri, and KMOX, the news talk station, is one of them. My next guest is living history. She is Dr. LaTonia Collins Smith. She is the first Black woman to head the historically Black college and university known as the Harris-Stowe State University. LaTonia, Dr. Collins Smith, welcome. It is always good to see you.
Well, thank you so much. It is always a pleasure to see you, Carol, as well. And it's funny, if my students, they have affectionately named it the illustrious Harris-Stowe State University.
Oh, they have added to it. I just got down the part.
The. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The illustrious Harris-Stowe State University, which is the only HBCU in the St. Louis area. So you have that makes it illustrious, that makes it distinctive for sure.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you know, I always say when you label something "the" with 2 E's, that means it's elevating. So
so we'll talk about what it means to be the first. But I read a headline in one of many stories written about you that you stumbled into higher education. Do explain.
How I stumbled. Well, I'll answer the first question. You know, I always tell individuals that with responsibility comes accountability. And so being the first, that comes with a lot of responsibility and also accountability. And so I feel that it is my responsibility to make sure that other Black and brown girls understand that they can do whatever it is that they set their hearts and their minds to do. And then also with accountability to make sure that we share the good news and the information about Harris-Stowe and about HBCUs and about, it's my responsibility to share that plight. And so that'll help me to segue into my stumble. Which was actually a good stumble, but I had a whole nother career. I was a social work and public health practitioner. I've always been in the helping profession. I have always known about volunteer work and the beauty in helping others since being a young girl. But I was working as a social work and public health practitioner in various capacities here in the city of St. Louis, but not only in the city, but also in the region. I've done some work over on the Illinois side as well. And I got a call one Saturday morning from a friend. I was actually an independent contractor by this point, and I had been for about 7 years as an independent social work and public health practitioner. And a really good friend of mine called one Saturday morning, who knows that Saturday mornings is the days that if I can, I like to sleep in. But it was this sense of urgency because she called a couple of times. And so she knew that would get my attention. And she said to me, she said, hey, there's a job for you at Harris-Stowe. And I said, no, it's not. At that time, I was juggling 3 contracts. And I was like, no. She said, I'm telling you, there's a job for you at Harris-Stowe. You got to look at this job description. They're looking for someone with a degree in social work, someone with a degree or a degree in public health. You have both. I'm telling you, this is for you. And she wouldn't let me off that phone. And so finally I had agreed, and this was still during the time where they were taking paper resumes. And so I finally agreed to apply. So I brought my resume in on a Saturday. I dropped it off. I got a call on a Monday. I interviewed on Tuesday. I accepted on Wednesday. I backed out on Thursday. And then I re-accepted on Friday. And so that was, I had convinced myself that I can do anything for 9 months. And so the goal was, it was a grant from SAMHSA. It was a federal grant that was secured by the White House Initiative on HBCUs. And the goal for the grant was to educate minority students, Black and Latinas, about HIV and AIDS, substance abuse, and hepatitis, the stuff that nobody wants to talk about. And my challenge was to take on students and prep them and get them to the point where they can educate their peers and put on programming. And so I said, okay, I can do this for 9 months. 9 months. I was getting married that September. And so I had to convince myself that I can do anything for 9 months, in addition to 3 other contracts. So that's the super one, right?
Wow.
Well, when I got to Harris-Stowe, it was like looking in a mirror. I saw myself. I saw students who looked like me, students who were from backgrounds much like mine, students who were sponges. They would sit at your feet and you can talk with them and share information about your journey, and they would just soak it up. And I also saw an opportunity to be who I needed to be, or I needed my freshman year as a first-generation college student by default on the University of Central Missouri State's campus. And that was, I had convinced myself 9 months. It was 13 years ago this month. So into 13 years. So that's how I stumbled. And I started, the grant was renewed, and then my students, they had taken the ball and ran with it. So I started volunteering. I became the part-time that was full-time, because coming to this campus gave me so much life. And it also, I always tell my students that they helped me to find my purpose and my passion and what it is that I am really supposed to be doing. So I started volunteering. I started volunteering on different committees, scholarship committee. I started volunteering on student conduct. I started teaching first-year students. And right around the time that the grant ended, maybe 4 years later, and another degree later, I had no intentions on going back to secure another degree. I was doing quite well, but I knew in order to get to the table in higher ed, you have to have alphabet soup behind your name.
Yes.
And to be able to have a seat at the table to advocate on behalf of my students. Most times I was here after 5. So I got to really interact with students outside the classroom and get to know what they wanted, what they needed, and where we were lacking here at the institution. And so I wanted a seat at the table so that I can share this information and to help us to become better and to be able to bring more students to this place and to this space. And so I went back and obtained a doctorate degree. And right as I was finishing the degree, we had a leadership change. This was shortly after Dr. Henry Givens Jr., he had retired. And then Dr. Warmack came. And I remember I wound up on this transition team, and we had these 15-minute meetings. And I said in my meeting, I said, I don't want to waste a lot of time going through my resume. I want to share with you my resume. But I had also prepared a proposal. And it was really kind of just outlining to him my 3-dimensional perspective on what needed to happen and how we can make this better for students. And I said, and here's a proposal. I've written this document for you. You can read it at your leisure. But I really want to take the rest of this time to share with you who I am and why I am here, things you'll never see on a resume. And we had that conversation, and about a month later, he called me back and he said to me, are you on campus? I said, yeah, I'm on campus. And he said, can you come over? I said, sure. And so when I got over here, he said, I want to talk to you a little bit more about your proposal. And I said, well, I've written a proposal for you. Now you need to go and hire you somebody to come in. I told you where the problems are.
Carry it out.
Come in and fix it, you know? And so he said, well, yeah, that's why I wanted to talk to you a little bit more. You know, so I kind of stumbled in higher ed and opened my big mouth and talked myself into working full time. So, yeah.
Well, so I want to go back, as I have with all of my guests this month, to how you became the woman that you are. And of course, before we've become these women with prayerfully vision and boldness and grit, that, you know, we were little girls who maybe knew and maybe did not know. I mean, I wanted to be a flight attendant, which I wouldn't mind doing that even now, so I could see the world. But what about you when LaTonia was a child growing up?
Yeah, so I was tremendously blessed in, I had a village. My mom was a single parent who was attending Lincoln University, and voila, here I am, her junior year. So my village started very early. My village started basically from the womb. My grandmother, my grandfather, my great uncle, my aunt, all of my mother's siblings, my older cousins, everybody pitched in to help. Shortly after my mom graduated from college, she came home. She worked for the government, but she was diagnosed with leukemia as a kid. And so when I was a kid, my mom, unfortunately, she passed away when I was 7 and she was 27 years young. Mm-hmm. But, you know, the beauty in that is that I had already established this village. We were already a part of a village, and I didn't miss a beat. I had a praying grandmother who was committed to making sure that life was good, along with all of my my other relatives. And so growing up, I had the best of both worlds. You know, as an only child, growing up as an only child, you have, you know, it's easy when it's just one, right? So my mom had I had this village in this circle. My mom had 2 really great friends that she met in college. And those were my aunts and my uncles, right? And so they had kids that were my age. And so I didn't miss a beat. I automatically had built-in sisters and brothers because of my mom's really good friends. But I grew up in that village. We grew up in North St. Louis. I grew up in the Ville neighborhood. I am a proud product of St. Louis public schools. I was always active and involved in church, of course. That's the foundation. And I would say that's kind of where leadership started. I can remember writing for church. My grandmother was the church clerk and secretary. And so I can remember writing things.
Like announcements or?
Yeah, like she would make sure that we wrote different things for church speeches. I can remember Easter speeches, and she was very adamant about, no, you're gonna stand flat-footed, you're gonna stand up, you're gonna speak fluently, and that's what you're gonna do. And so I was a part of Girl Scouts. It's so funny. I just had a conversation not too long ago with the executive director of Girl Scouts and went down this memory lane about how important that was in my upbringing too. And one of the things about Girl Scouts, it has a built-in friendship club. So I was very active in that. I was also active in anything and everything in school, cheerleading, the calligraphy club, you name it. I was a part of it, cake decorating. I can remember so many different experiences. And so that's really the fabric of who I am. Church, involvement outside of church, education was very important in our household. I can remember times when my grandmother, before dinner, we had to write. She was very adamant about reading and writing, and making sure that your penmanship was of a caliber in which people would be able to understand what you're trying to articulate. So that was me. I also, you talk about being a college president was never on the radar for me. Originally, as a kid, I was just sharing this with some of my colleagues here that I was going to be a teacher. You couldn't tell me that I was not going to be a teacher. We lived behind my branch. So back then they used to call them branches, and we lived behind my elementary school. And so I can remember times going into the backyard and playing, but I would sneak out of the yard over to the dumpster where they would throw away books in the summertime. And I would gather the books and bring them back into the house, into my playroom. And I would teach the other kids in the neighborhood that were younger than me. And it's funny because when I think back to it, I would mimic those things that my teacher would do in the classroom. But it was important for me, whatever I learned in my class, that I taught the kids on the blocks too. So we would mimic school. We would have our lesson, we would have recess, we would have snacks, and our house was kind of the go-to house. So my grandma was everybody's mom, and she was a very good cook. So oftentimes that was a good place to come because you were going to get a meal, you're going to learn something that I had learned in school. So those are some fond memories that I remember growing up. And ironically, being here at Harris-Stowe, the majority of my educators were Harris-Stowe State College alums. And a few years ago, preparing for commencement, we had invited the 50-year class back. And I'm in the holding room and I look next to me and it's my second grade teacher. Oh. I recognized her by her profile. And I said to her, I said, "Is your name Miss Curry?" And she said, "Yes." I said, "You probably won't remember me." I said, "But you were my second grade teacher." And she said, "I was?" And I said, "Yes." So once I shared with her who I was and where I lived, she remembered. And I could tell her so many things that she did while I was a student of hers. I could tell her what kind of car she drove, the color of the interior. I could tell her everything because I was so impressed with my educators. And so much so that by the time I got to high school, I was 14 years old, and I can remember walking through the hallway and I bumped into a teacher in the hallway. She was coming out of the faculty lounge. And she said to me, "Hi," and we kind of talked. She said, "What's your name?" And I shared my name. She said, "Well, you're a pretty little girl, but you need to come to my office. I need to put something on those lips." Thus, that's what started me to wearing red lipstick. My red lipstick, right? Well, the blessing in that is this, that happenstance meeting in the hallway turned to over 30 years of a mentoring, loving, motherly, daughterly relationship. And so my godmother was a teacher in my high school. I never had her for a class. I met her in the hallway, but it was exactly what I needed at the time that I needed it. Here I am, I'm 14 years old, and my mom passed away when I was 7, but it was divine intervention to be able to connect with someone who could help usher me into the next level and the next phase of my life. And that was, I knew I always wanted to go to college, but how do you navigate that? Here I am, a first generation college student by default, because my mom was a college graduate, but she had passed away. And so here's my grandmother doing this again. So I always say that I'm very grateful because I never missed a beat. And that happenstance meeting in the hallway turned to a very loving relationship, and someone who was with me through this journey and had the opportunity to witness me serve in this capacity and in this role. As much as I say, I wish she was still here, she unfortunately unexpectedly passed away last August, but I feel her with me every day as I do with my grandmother and my mom.
You definitely had a village. If, number one, you always wanted to go to college. That tells us something. I mean, even those who never thought about it and then were able to, through mentoring and encouragement, get there, no less success for them. But you always wanted to do that. But you didn't always want to be a college president.
No, I had no, even when I went back to work on a doctorate degree, I just wanted to work on a college campus. And ironically, Carol, I wanted to work at Harris-Stowe. Even when I was in the doctoral program, I was presented with several different opportunities to work at other institutions. And even my advisor at the university said, have you ever thought about leaving Harris-Stowe? And would send me job opportunities. And I would say, no, I came here so that I can work at Harris-Stowe. And I just wanted to be on a college campus. I wanted to make my contributions to the students that I absolutely fell in love with. And in a space where I saw myself every day. And I tell people that I consider myself tremendously blessed because here I am in a space that I describe as stumbling into, but it helped me to find my purpose and my passion. And every day, I still feel the same way today that I did 13 years ago. I can come to this space and I show up my authentic self, and I walk away every day knowing that I helped someone in some capacity, even if it's to show them where the restroom is that day, But it is an awesome blessing to be able to operate in your purpose and your passion and go somewhere where, regardless to what the day brings, you still are in anticipation the next day for what that day may bring. And I know that there are individuals who would never know what that feels like, to be able to operate in your purpose, your passion, and to absolutely love what you do, even if you didn't receive compensation for it. I've lived it. I've done it before. I've spent a whole year of my career at one point absolutely hating what it is that I went to work to do every day. And it is a miserable space to be in. And so I do not take anything for granted, or I don't take it lightly, being in this space and what I have been entrusted and what I have been called to do as a leader of this institution at this point in time. And so I count it all joy. It is it goes back to what I said earlier. With responsibility comes accountability. And vice versa, with accountability comes responsibility.
When you were in middle school, high school, were all of your friends, were they of the same mindset? Did everybody want to go to college? Was that the common theme?
It's so funny because, yeah, the majority of us, we did go on to go to college. I graduated from Cleveland NJROTC. So a lot of my classmates went on to the military. But there were a good number of us who went on to college, and we are quite successful. And it's funny because I have a classmate from Cleveland who actually says to me every time he sees me, he says, if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have gone to college. And I didn't know that until a few years ago. He did wind up going to the same college I went to, but I thought nothing of it. There was 4 of us from the same graduating class who went to University of Central Missouri. And he said to me, if it wasn't for you, I would have never gone to college. And here's this person who is very successful, have several different businesses, and is doing quite well, has a beautiful family and 3 children who have all gone on to college and to be successful. And to just think back, you know, like you just never know who's watching, and you never know
Right.
what impact that you will have on individuals. So, yeah.
What would you say to your much younger self? And because it sounds like you have this incredible village, even though you suffer an unimaginable loss of losing your mother at such a young age, you are, some years later, you find another incredible woman who is able to fill the role at the right time. So what would you say to your younger self?
You know, I would say to my younger self, don't waste major time on minor things and things that you cannot control. You know, life is going to keep lifing regardless. You know, there's nothing you can do about that. And, you know, I've learned throughout time, and it has taken me some time to get to that point to understand. You know, I think back, I wasted some time on some things, right? But I would say to myself, don't waste major time on minor things. You know, there's so much work to do, and keep moving. The other thing that I've had to learn over a period of time is, and I share this with my students all the time, for every no, there's a yes. You know, sometimes no's lead us to exactly where we're supposed to be. And while you can't see it, especially your younger self, my younger self, I couldn't see it. You know, you get told a no or something doesn't go the way you plan. It's like the end of the world, right? But what I've learned over a period of time is that it's not the end of the world. That is just a way of readjusting the sail and putting you on the path in which you're supposed to be on that path. If I hadn't have been told no, I oftentimes think back to this. If I hadn't have been told no, I wouldn't be where I am today. I wouldn't be in the space that I absolutely love. So, you know, I think about job opportunities and things that I've applied for in the past. I'm like, now, how do they choose? Why did they choose me? You know, but for every no, there's a yes. And it was redirecting me into the path and where I'm supposed to be. So those are things that
we as we celebrate Black History Month, of course, we are celebrating this at a time that there's a distinct and in some cases successful move to restrict the type of history that's being taught. There's some, I would use the strong phrase fear-mongering out there about how history is being taught. As an educator, as a college president, someone with a social work, who was a social worker with that background, I think it all adds up to your ability to answer this question. What's the relevance of Black history? And in 2023, is it still a necessary thing that we focus on? Of course, I would say yes to that because I'm doing these interviews, but you go ahead.
I would say yes. And first, let me say, Carol, I am always a social worker at heart. That's who I am. That's my foundation. That's who I am. Even in this role, I practice. I probably practice more in this role than I did when I was not. But I would say absolutely yes. I think that for me, I can remember when we talk about our younger selves, it was very important. My grandmother grew up in the civil rights era. She lived it. And so there was never a time growing up in my home where we did not know about the Marian Andersons and the Martin Luther Kings and the Malcolm X. We knew about that information because one of the things was she was very adamant about us reading it and understanding it. And so for me, I think it's very important that we still continue to help younger people know about our history and how we arrived to where we are today. You know, I think about it for me, when I talk about accountability and responsibility, there was a time there wasn't someone who looked like me in this role.
And it wasn't allowed.
It wasn't that long ago. And so it's important for us to share the history. You know, we share American history. Every part of history is important because that helps individuals to understand from whence we came. I am a strong believer that you cannot know where you're going until you know where you have been. And so that's how we get to the point of the first in this and the first in that. Because if you don't know that there was never someone in that space, it's important for you to understand your role as a first in certain spaces. And so I think it's very important. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Before I let you go, I want to go ahead.
But I was just going to say, and as we talk about relevancy of HBCUs and those type of things, and people oftentimes ask me, what's different about an HBCU? Well, in an HBCU, you learn those things. You learn about Black history. You learn about all types of history, but you also learn this sense of pride of what it means to be an African-American in general. And so, absolutely, I think it's very important.
Before I let you go, I want to hear about your vision today for Harris-Stowe State University as you expand it, grow it, nurture it, move it forward.
Yeah, and so the vision is very simple, Carol. We will continue to provide a high quality and affordable education that is diverse. And also, we want to make sure that we're unapologetic about the population of students we serve, our first generation, under-resourced, underprepared student. That's who we are. We won't shy away from that. But what you will see is that we won't gravitate away from our foundation, which is education. In the next couple of weeks, we'll be making some announcements about some extraordinary things that we have going on in our College of Education as we work to rebuild and rebrand it in that space and to really make contributions to urban education and where we are right now and the crisis that you're hearing about in education. It is our responsibility to provide some response to that. The next thing is we're building a robust STEM agenda here at Harris-Stowe to make sure that the STEM fields are diverse in a way that there are women and individuals of color and minorities to be able to really have an impact in that space. We're also exploring and exploding in entrepreneurship. What we know right now is that Gen Zs, they don't necessarily like to check in somewhere, right? Or punch a... They're very entrepreneurial in spirit. And so we have a response to that. Last spring, we started our entrepreneurship certificate program that has been bustling. We're in our 4th cohort, and we have over 100 people waiting list for individuals to be a part of that. And that is open to the community, and it is also open as an option for our students. And lastly, we launched our initiatives in the GIS space. So we're preparing leaders in K through 12 already now to be able to walk into the geospatial intelligence space. So that's what you'll begin to see from Harris-Stowe, but also most importantly, you'll begin to see our students involved in the work in the community. And that's the social worker in me, because it is very important for our students to be able to give back and to be a part of the community in which they live and grow. So that's what you'll begin to see from Harris-Stowe. We launched our new strategic plan on January 3rd, and we have not looked back since. So there's a lot of great things on the horizon here at Harris-Stowe.
At the illustrious Harris-Stowe State University. She is indeed the first Black woman to lead Harris-Stowe State University. Dr. LaTonia Collins Smith, you are indeed living history, and we thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Carol. Thank you for all that you do to elevate Harris-Stowe, and also to make sure that individuals are aware of all the great things that's happening here.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Now, let me see if I can figure out how to save this. There it is. Okay. Stop recording. All righty.